What's going on, ladies, germs, and morbid angels? Today we're going to be going over some of the most underrated brutal death metal albums ever. And what something means by underrated, I'm glad you asked. It means that it's often overshadowed by a band's other catalog of material, like Breeding the Spawn, for example, is kind of underrated because it's sandwiched between Effigy and Pierced. Just albums that get overlooked by other albums from a band. Start off at number 10, we have Cenotaph with Pseudo-Verminal Cadaverium. I think that this one was kind of the start to their modern sound. It's a little bit more blast, a little bit less old school death metal, but I think that this one is one that kind of gets forgotten sometimes from their catalog. I found it to be a very good one. A classic United Guttural Press. But yeah, if I was to recommend Cenotaph, it'd obviously be Puked, but this is still a very good one. Next we have Yulugereah with a name that I cannot say on YouTube. It's actually still sealed. It's a Severed Records release, but it's one of the less generic ones. It has super high-pitched screaming, some of the most high-pitched screaming in the genre. But this is definitely a band that no one really, I see people talk about really, but this is a Jimmy classic, a poser killer. Again, with the high-pitched vocals are some of the best on that. For those who don't know, Carry On was another Severed Records band. Now, the thing that makes this special is it's a brutal death metal album. It's very much so like Scattered Remnants is the closest thing I would compare it to. Some very cool artwork, this stuff with the demons and the wings, always like sort of like that style of artwork, beautifully drawn. But again, this is one that I don't see a lot of people talking about in brutal death metal, really just people that have been in the scene for a while. This is a classic to them. It's a very good one. It's one that I always recommend to youngsters and young bloods. Not no Fool of Hell listeners. Next one is Possessed Entity. So this is a later Pathos production release. Pathos, John Dwyer, love him or hate him. He put out stuff like Ton, Pyrexia, Dehumanized. So some of them are classics, but this is like mid 2010, so it's kind of past the prime of brutal death metal, but this has some of the greatest slamming brutal death metal parts. It's kind of like demonic slam, I would say, was it like a term, but the first song, Murderous Cult Rituals, incredibly good. Organ Feasting Frenzy, incredibly good, but the people don't know that this was actually all recorded in like the late 90s. It was just never released, so the reason why this is such a good more modern brutal death metal release is because it's actually an old school brutal death metal record. I mean, they wrote this when it was like the late 90s, so like 97 to 99, something like that, but all that material that's in the Possessed Entity was actually recorded in the 90s. Here we have our first cassette of the day with Godless Truth with Self-Realization. Now, this was a very technical one. I always thought that this album was very underrated. The one that put out this one was Stillborn Sounds. I think it's it's an Indonesia label. But Godless Truth, I always thought people were just like thought of it as like a weaker band. I never thought that was the case. I always thought that Godless Truth was really good. I forget if the people in Vomit Remnants from Japan did the artwork for this, or the people from Godless Truth did the artwork for Vomit Remnants. I'm sure someone in the comments could clarify. I didn't do much research, but Godless Truth is incredibly slept on, very underrated. The next one is Beheaded with recounts of disembodiment. Incredible slams. I know that Soul Dead and like their other stuff. This one kind of isn't. I don't see it anywhere on people's like lists. I never see people talking about this album. This was on Crash Music, so it was like a 2002 album, I believe. I got it signed by David, which was all that black right there. You can kind of see. But this one I always thought was their best, and I don't know why I never see it around on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I always loved the artwork. It reminded me a lot of sort of like the modern stuff, like Defeated Sanity and stuff like that. But yeah, this one, really good. That's, again, Beheaded with recounts of disembodiment. You know, it's funny. Anymore, I just feel like Ken's Crypt just showing off death metal album CDs, stuff like that. A newer one, Afterbirth. This was the first one that they did when they came back, the first official album. This is the Time Traveler's Dilemma from Afterbirth, and I love this album. Out of the ones that they've done, I love it the most. This is signed fully by the band, so you got Will, Cody, Keith, you know, stuff like that. Sort of ambient, sort of. They're pretty experimental at this time, but not like nowadays with their experimentation. This was very much like their classic New York death metal. So you had like the Suffocation, the Pyrexia, you know, the Dehumanized stuff, and then it was like they threw in some like ambient type like instrumental stuff, which was a nice flavor of taste. Obviously, best song is Maggots in Her Smile, classic. This, to me, is a must for brutal death metal fans in general. If you have not, you should pick up the Afterbirth song, or not the Afterbirth song, the Afterbirth album, Time Traveler's Dilemma. I think they had an EP before this called Maggots in Her Smile, if I'm not mistaken. This had the original vocalists. This one has Will Smith. I'm pretty sure this is the first official release with Will Smith on vocals, but I thought that this one even rivals the Psychopathic Embryotomy demo, the green and black demo with the alien. People will not listen to this one, and I don't know why, because it's really good. So if you haven't, I would really check that out. Next, we have Souls of Fate with Sandstorm. Now, I see everyone on the Crime Syndicate wave, you know, these slammers. You know, I personally think that Sandstorm is way better. It's like Dying Fetus, but a million times more brutal. Like this is like what Dying Fetus should have been after like the 90s when they went more like technical. These guys kind of filled the role in for Dying Fetus at that time. Artwork doesn't look totally brutal, but the music stands for it. You got some slamming like Russian or whatever these guys are. You know, you have the internal bleeding. You know, but yeah, I mean, it's a great CD. It's on Retribute Records. I think you can find it for pretty cheap, at least during the time of this recording. But I think that this is like perfect brutal death metal. If people, you know, like the old school like slam New York death metal stuff is coming back for the kids nowadays. I think that it's sort of what should have been. I think it was just like too early for its time. Like I think nowadays if something like this was released, it would get a lot more attraction. I know Crime Syndicate has been getting a lot more traction, but I feel like Sandstorm is the reason why this band is a household name in underground brutal death metal, especially in the early 2000s. Another one that is slept on is Cadaver Art by Mortal Decay. So, you know, this isn't Gathering of Human Artifacts. This isn't Sickening Erotic. This is not Forensic. This isn't even Blueprint of Splatter. This is Cadaver Art. And people will say it doesn't have Johnny, it doesn't have Kelly, it doesn't have Danny from Malignancy. But you know what? It has Anthony, their drummer, on vocals, on Ravenous Addiction. The Ravenous Addiction is a top 10 Mortal Decay song, in my opinion. If you have not heard Ravenous Addiction, you need to listen to it. The song is hauntingly chilling. One of the most chilling. People to be like, oh, like Chronicles, like I kept her teeth to remind me of her smile. Like, pales in comparison, buddy. Pales in comparison, brother. But yeah, you got classic stuff like Consummation, which is a great start. Cadaverous Sculpture's another one. Reanimate, Ruthlessly Scissored. So you get some classic stuff. It went kind of like Deeds of Flesh. It's a little bit more technical, but the brutality is still there. It's still twisty and turny like Forensic. But Cadaver Art, honestly, one of their best. Coming in at first place for the most underrated brutal death metal albums ever is Extinction of Benevolence by Internal Bleeding. All right. The reason why is because it's sandwiched right in between Voracious Content and Driven to Conquer. Two totally different ones. Voracious is more of like the hip-hoppy slam. Driven to Conquer is much more of that like hardcore-esque hate breed. But Extinction of Benevolence is their brutal death metal record. I honestly think that the band peaked at this. It tied off the demo era perfectly because it had the two other demo songs that were not placed on Voracious Content, which were Ruthless Inhumanity and Conformed to Obscurity. These songs were revamped and brutalized with Frank Rini doing the frog vocals. Okay, yes, this has frog vocals. This has really bad CGI from the 90s. It looks like Beast Wars, Transformers CGI. But this is brutality. It starts off, just smashes you in your face with ocular introspection. It has one of the deepest, meaningfulest songs ever, and one of the most favorite songs by Chris Pervalis and Frank Rini, which is the 6-track titled Plagued by Catharsis. For those who don't know, lyrically, it is one of the most deepest song. It's not talking about demons. It's not talking about the government. It's talking about real messed up, real dark personal things in life that one deals with. And I think that it's the best song on the record, and I honestly think it's the best Internal Bleeding song, which again is Plagued by Catharsis, which is on Extinction of Benevolence. You know, it's not the main staple stuff like Gods of Severance. It's not Anointed in Servitude, Languish in Despair, but you know what? It's completely different. Again, it's Plagued by Catharsis. If you have not listened to that or this entire album, you must check it out. This is Internal Bleeding at their heaviest. This, I think, is one of the heaviest brutal death metal albums in general. And if you have not picked up a copy of Extinction of Benevolence, I highly recommend it. Again, this goes to toe-to-toe with some of the most heaviest brutal death metal albums out there. But yeah, those are my picks for top 10 of some of the most underrated brutal death metal albums out there. If you find any other brutal death metal albums that you think don't get as much praise as others for bands in their catalog, right around in the description. I'll tell you if you're stupid, a moron, or if you're actually a homeboy and you got some good taste. But other than that, keep on staying sick. If you haven't already, subscribed, because I'm going to be posting a lot more. My subscribers have been up. Views have been up. We're killing the Nails fans. We're killing the Full of Hell fans. All right? The camouflage shirts are coming off because of my videos. All right? But thanks all for the support. Thanks for watching, and comment down below which bands you think are underrated as F Homeboy.